Our last epic teen session for Friday afternoon's Word on the Street 2021. This is our mystery and murder session. So very thrilling and exciting. Hopefully not too scary for anybody. I think you can all survive. Our guests this afternoon are authors June Her and Tash McAdam, and we'll be chatting with them in a moment. I do want to acknowledge on behalf of the Lethbridge Public Library that we're gathered on the lands of the Blackfoot people of the Canadian Plains, and we pay respect to the Blackfoot people past, present, and future, while recognizing and respecting their cultural heritage, beliefs, and relationship to the land. The city of Lethbridge is also home to the Métis Nation of Alberta, Region 3, and these are always good things to keep in mind when we gather together and when we talk about stories and people. So welcome, Tash. Welcome, June. I will have you each give your own introductions as you know yourselves best and you know your books best. I forgot to ask you which of you would like to go first. So I'm going to go in alphabetical order and throw June out onto stage.
Okay, so hello. Thank you so much for having me here. My name is June Her, and I was born in South Korea. I moved to Canada when I don't even remember, like kindergarten. But when I was a teen, I moved back to live in and study in Korea for a few years, and then I'm back again. So I went back and forth a lot. And I am the author of The Silence of Bones and my more recent book, The Forest of Stolen Girls. And these are both YA historical mysteries set in Joseon Dynasty Korea. And The Forest of Stolen Girls is about two estranged sisters who have to team up to search for their father, who happens to be a famous investigator during this time. And he goes missing while trying to solve the case of 13 missing girls.
Excellent. And Tash?
Hi. I'm Tash McAdam. I write YA in a bunch of different subgenres. So I have a 4-book science fiction series about superheroes taking down a government that tries to use their telepathic powers to control the population. So that series is called The Psionics, and it is a gay old time. And then the book that I'm going to talk a little bit more about today is an actual mystery. So it's relevant to our panel topic of murder and mystery. And that book is called Bloodsport. So you can see that this is quite a small, thin book. I have a couple of these books in the same line, and they're quick little reads, like novella length, and they're very sort of straight through on the plot. So they're a good, fast read. And in Bloodsport, we follow a trans boy whose sister has gone and been killed or died under mysterious circumstances. And the police think that she's died of a drug overdose, but Jason, the boy, is convinced that that can't be true. And so he sets out to investigate his sister's death by himself.
Thank you both. If it ever looks like I'm not paying attention, I'm just madly scribbling notes so I don't miss anything for, sweet, sweet questions. So let's start with kind of a nice big general question. Why mysteries? What pulled you into the idea of writing a mystery? Tash, you're still up on my screen. Would you like to go first?
Sure, yeah. I watch a lot of mysteries on TV, like ever since I was little, and I've always loved trying to figure out who done it ahead of time. That's one of my favorite games. And so I started thinking about how I wished that murder stories would go and the kind of murder stories I wanted to see. And so ended up writing YA murder mystery with teens front and center, so less of a kind of police investigative angle, but letting the young people figure out what is happening and sort of finding that information really appealed to me. So you get to do the YA growth of character and like the teen coming of age, but based around like a central plot of a murder or a mystery of some kind. I think is a really fun way to play with characters.
And June, what pulls you into the world of mystery and thrilling stories?
So for me, so there's the practical answer, which is I wrote novels for several years, but not mysteries. And when I tried to get it published, agents would always be like, this is a good book, like your writing is solid, but you don't have a plot. And I'll be like, what is plot? Like I see a 3 act structure, but I'm like, I'm doing it. But they're like, no, not really. But then when I began writing mysteries, it gives you such a solid plot from the get-go. It's like, a mystery occurs and the character, the main premise is the character trying to solve the mystery. And so you have to, go through, XYZ evidence and like in order to obtain that answer. So it's very clear from the beginning, like, what does the character want? It's like to solve the mystery. And so writing mysteries really taught me how to write books. But also on the personal side, I think, I'm that girl who, whenever I have time off, I'll always be watching Crime Watch. And I'm just I think if I was living another life and I had the capacity to be like a detective, I would have been. But like knowing who I am, I'd probably not survive. And so I just kind of live vicariously through my characters by making them into amateur sleuths. So yeah.
It's a much safer way to do it, I think.
I agree.
Less actual alleys and dumpsters that you have to go into.
Yep.
Such a good.
I mean, maybe in the research process.
Yes.
So what do you think makes mysteries so appealing to readers? There's a long history of mystery fiction and sort of thriller fiction going back, decades, if not centuries. Why do you think that's still such a popular type of story, and why do people love them so much? June, would you like to go first?
That's a good question. I think, like for me, I think it's the fact that life itself is a mystery, but sometimes we're unable to solve it oftentimes. And there's so much crime that occurs in real life that, never gets justice. And so I think it comes from a place of maybe anger and frustration. And so when we're reading a novel and we get a very oftentimes like a clean answer, like as in like you get an answer to, what happened to this case, like what happened, like there is justice served oftentimes at the end of mystery or thriller books. And so I think there is that kind of satisfaction that comes with these books. And I also really like mystery thrillers because a lot of them, not always, but like it's a good way, it's a great kind of genre that also gives commentary on things that are going on right now. Even for like my historical, like the commentary is still really relevant to now because, like even back then, women were not treated well and there was a lot of injustice and crime done against women. And so I'm able to touch on that through my books. And so I think, just people are drawn to that. Maybe that's my theory, but I don't know.
And Tash?
I thought that was a great theory. I was thinking about the sort of satisfaction when you combine the predictable with the unpredictable. You look at a lot of mystery authors, they, like many romance authors, will really put out, dozens of novels with the same character going, so, same character flow, going through essentially the same steps. And we're happy as an audience to trust them and go along for that ride again and again because we trust that it's going to lead us somewhere satisfying, that we're going to get that closure that we are missing in life. And I think the beauty of a mystery is that you can throw it anywhere, right? You can throw it over any other genre. Like a romance mystery, you've got your historical mysteries, you've got your sci-fi mysteries, you're on a spaceship, but someone's been murdered. It just adds a bit more plot, as you said, to hang a genre around if you want. And it sort of gives you that like pathway through a world, like you're with these characters solving some sort of problem.
It's a very satisfying, I guess, kind of genre as well, because hopefully, I think in the best of them, there's usually an actual resolution at the end, which we don't always get in real life.
No.
So at least we can hope for that in fiction.
And sometimes your predictions are so wrong and you just get like best twists, and that feeling of having been thoroughly misled and tricked and then getting to read the book again but knowing now, that's definitely something I find really exciting and something that I've tried to do in my YA murder mystery that hasn't been sold to anyone yet, so may never exist, but hopefully one day will exist, and like tricks you with who it is. That was my plan.
The tricksiness of the red herrings and all of that, right? When you're writing a mystery or a thriller, I'm guessing it requires even perhaps more planning than other books, because you need to make sure everything scaffolds and ties together and gets you to that actual answer. What's your process for writing in terms of hiding in the right number of clues and still not making it too obvious, still making it exciting? Tash?
Outlining is way more important to me in a mystery than it has. Like, I don't really outline most of my projects, like especially survivalist type stories, adventures, where it's, you know, like people versus nature. I'll just like throw them in there, see what happens. And I didn't plan my sci-fi series really past the first book, and I was equally shocked as my audience when I found out where it was going. But with murders, you kind of have to know, but I didn't know who did it in my murder mystery novel until we got to the very like end of the novel, and I wrote the actual murder scene was when I found out who did it. I was like, oh, it makes so much sense. So like I knew who didn't do it, but there were a couple of people who it could have been, and I was waiting to see what felt right. So in that way, it was like I got to discover the plot twist myself. I forget what the question was, but hopefully I answered somewhere in there.
And June, when you're what's your process for writing or planning out?
Oh, it's chaotic. Like I think so when I begin a first draft, like I also believe that I also need an outline, because like kind of Tash said, with mysteries, it gets really complicated if you don't have an outline, because it's like mysteries revolve around, you know, red herrings, evidences, and the case. And so I think it's good to have some kind of like rough idea of where the mystery is going. And so I always start off with, you know, who the killer is, the motive, and the crime. But as I'm writing and getting to know the characters, I'm like, hey, this other person has way more motive than my original killer. And so my killers always change from draft to draft. And so I'm always like suspicious of everyone. But then usually by the final draft, I'm like, oh, okay, I figured out I have to choose a killer. And so I figure out who the killer is. And then I kind of go backward and add in all the evidences. And for me, red herrings are all about, you know, throwing in distractions. And so I try to give all the characters strong motivations, but the strongest goes to the killer. And so that's how I kind of write my mysteries. It's a mess. I don't even know how I how I manage to write mysteries. It's like in real life, I'm not. No one would think that I'd be able to solve a mystery in real life, and so I don't know how I do it, but like that's kind of my rough process.
Apparently you don't do it until the last version of
yeah.
Right now I've got it, which I relate to so strongly. I've never felt so seen.
So what, in your opinions, makes a good detective? What sort of qualities do those characters need to have?
Ooh, depends on the subgenre, surely. Because I love a cyber detective. Like I love someone who is just like going online and like tracking down information and like using technology. But obviously, if you're going to put yourself in physical danger, then having some way to back that up is great, like Sherlock Holmes and his trusty walking stick. But I think probably determination, just to like see it through and overcome all of the inevitable hurdles, because they're actually in a plotted novel, so we throw hurdles in their way. They have to have the determination to overcome it.
June, anything that makes a detective really awesome in your opinion?
I would say, similar to Tash, definitely determination, because there will always be like seeming dead ends when it comes to mysteries. So you have to be determined enough to kind of dig deeper. And I'd also add curiosity to know the answer. And I think that that hunger to know the truth is a good drive to have when you're solving something.
Yes.
Fantastic. I just realized I didn't have you read from your books at the start, like I said I was going to. So would you now like to present excerpts from your books? Since I said I was going to have you do that and then forgot. June, would you like to go first with an excerpt
Okay.
from the book?
I will start from chapter 1. The screen of mist was thick around the red pinewood vessel, as though secrets hid beyond of a land I was not permitted to see. But I knew by memory the windy place 1,000 leagues south of the port, a place with jagged coasts and grasslands dotted with black lava rock huts, and with mountains layered upon misty layers. Somewhere on Jeju, this island of wind and stone, between Kochawa Forest and the cloud-topped peaks of Mount Hala, my father had disappeared. My eyelids itched with exhaustion as I leaned against the edge of the boat. Mokpo Port grew smaller in the distance. The bamboo sails high above billowed in the wind, laced with sea spray, which left everything damp. My robe, the deck, the posts, the shivering passengers huddled around a game, a square board with roughly cut wooden pieces. These passengers were likely returning home to Jeju, not heading there to look for the missing, as I was. I glanced over my shoulder and looked past the strands of my dancing hair, caught in a blast of wind, and searched for Mokpo Port again. This time I couldn't see anything, other than the mist and the swelling black waters. Gripping the vessel's edge, I took in a deep breath, trying to ease the panic fluttering in my chest. It was 1426, the year of the Crown Princess election, the period when young ladies like myself would be dreaming of entering the palace. Yet here I was, cast away at sea, headed toward a penal island of political convicts. Forget about the investigation, fear whispered in my mind. Whatever is on that island, it might kill you. I shook my head and reached into the cotton sack filled with everything I brought with me. My hand moved past the wrapped up dried persimmons, past the necklace with a wooden whistle, to father's 5-stitched black notebook, which I withdrew. The cover flew open in the wind and pages fluttered, burnt and curled by fire. The last half of the notebook was so badly incinerated that only stubs of black edges remained. A stranger by the name of Poksun had sent this to me, and I had so many questions for her. Who was she? Who had she sent the journal? Oh, why had she sent the journal? How did she know my father? The deck creaked. I cast a sidelong glance to my right and noticed a gentleman pausing in his steps to gaze out at the sea. One of his hands was braced on the edge of the ship, while the other rested on the hilt of his sword tied to his sash belt. It was as though he was on the lookout for Woko pirates from the east. By his long sleeveless overcoat made of stormy purple silk, worn over a long-sleeved lavender robe, I could tell he was a nobleman. Good morning, sir, I said, my voice quiet. It failed to reach him over the crashing waves. I dug my nails into my palms. I was not Minhani today. I was not a young lady with her hair braided back down her back and tied with a red ribbon, marking me as an unmarried woman. Good morning, sir, I called out to him, my voice louder and lower than usual. He turned his head at last, and beneath the shadow cast by the brim of his tall black hat was the face of a middle-aged man with a square jaw framed by a wispy beard. His hooded eyelids weighed over his solemn gaze and whispered of hidden secrets. Yes? The question rolled out from deep within his chest. Do you know how long it would take to reach Jeju? No longer than half a day, unless the weather grows worse. He stared at me a moment, then returned his gaze ahead. And how far would the travel be from Noan Port to Noan Village? I asked. A single brow arched. Noan? Yes. Perhaps a 3 hours walk, he replied. I would not know, as I have never traveled by foot. But why are you going there? I'm looking for someone. He shifted on his feet to fully face me, his hand still resting on the edge of the boat. Who are you? He asked, his question poised as an order. My muscles tightened. I was the child of Detective Min, but I could not tell him that, for he might have already heard of my father, if not from his famous detective work, then from his inexplicable disappearance. And everyone who'd heard of him would have also heard that Detective Min had only one daughter. And young ladies like myself did not belong so far from home. I'll just stop it there.
Thank you, June. That's very, very atmospheric.
I try.
Tash, would you like to share a bit of your,
But
your book?
I meant to say after June introduced herself, but I actually met my wife in South Korea and for a year and a half. So
Oh my
she's
gosh.
Canadian, not Korean, but we were both teaching out there.
I love that.
A fun extra bonus for me listening to you talking about Korea and your story.
Oh, it's beautiful.
So I'm just going to start from the beginning as well. So I feel like with mysteries, it's important to get that original setup. So this is Bloodsport. Chapter 1. Jason's hands won't stop shaking. He clenches his fists, his sister's silver ring digging into his palm, but they keep shaking. He bursts into tears the second the door finally closes. He can hear the footsteps of the police officer walking away, the same one who came 6 weeks ago to inform him of his sister's death. Door closed and case closed. In front of Jason, on the sad small bed in the sad small room, is everything Becca left behind. 2 boxes, a whole life, and Jason's whole hope for a future. He's about to age out of the foster care system. In 4 months, when he turns 18, he'll be booted out of the group home, maybe onto the street. Becca was supposed to be here. Becca was supposed to take care of him. But all that's left of Becca are these 2 boxes. It's hard to breathe. His binder must be too tight. His chest feels like it's collapsing. It takes him 3 tries to get his shirt off. He pulls off the material, crushing his bust down flat, and throws it on the old blanket on the bed. He feels better, but barely. 2 years on testosterone has changed Jason. It's made his shoulders wider, his jaw bigger, and his body hairier. But without a shirt, it's easy to see what he is. A trans guy. Someone in danger. The staff at the group home know, of course. They take him to get his shots, and they see his doctors. But if any of the other kids found out, Jason could be in for a world of hurt. He stands in the middle of his room, mindful of pain and fear. He feels like he's dying. He can't breathe at all. After a while, the panic attack fades, and as he calms down, he realizes he's half naked. It would be so bad if anyone walked in right now. Running to the bed, he grabs his binder, but the door bangs open before he can put it back on. Panicking, Jason drops the binder and grabs his shirt. If anyone sees his chest, they'll know what he's been hiding. He pulls his shirt over his head, his back still to the door. He prays for his strong shoulders to help him pass, for whoever it is to see just a boy. Yo, Jace, I saw the pigs came by again. Have they solved your sister's murder yet? The thick voice can only belong to Derek. Jason hates Derek. The guy is built like a monster and has a personality to match. It takes everything Jason has in him to sound normal. Not yet. Ever since he'd yelled at the care worker that his sister couldn't have overdosed. She never did drugs, not ever. The other teens at the care home liked to tease him about it. Especially Derek. Jason's whole body shivers as he wonders whether Derek wants to fight again. Jason's ribs are still bruised from last time. If he stays facing away, his back is open to possible danger. But if he turns around, Derek might see his chest under his shirt. But to his relief, Derek snorts and bangs back out into the hallway. Jason waits until the door's shut behind him and then rushes to it. He kicks the door stopper tightly into place. It's dangerous. It's a fire hazard. He's not supposed to have it. They've taken 4 off him already, but it's the only way he can breathe in his room. Safely locked in, Jason walks slowly back to the bed. His whole body feels like it's full of rocks. What is he going to do without Becca? How can this be his life now? Dropping onto the bed, he knocks one of the boxes over. It tips sideways, spilling its contents onto the blanket. The copy of Sherlock Holmes that falls out makes him gasp. It was their dad's, the collected stories. When he'd lost his job and started drinking, he'd started selling most of his first editions. But Becca had taken this one. First, it had been in her bedroom on the shelf by her bed. Then, after she moved out, it was on a display shelf in her apartment, the apartment Jason was going to move into once he left the group home. The book is light brown with gold leaf on the leather cover and gold-edged pages. Becca's read it so often that the creamy cover is dirty. Jason reaches out to put the book back in the box. He can't face looking through the pieces of her life yet. But as he picks up the book, he realizes there's something wrong. The page edges aren't shiny like they should be. They're dull and brown, no gold leaf in sight. Curious, he picks up the book, runs his finger down the spine. The cover feels weird in his hand. He opens the book, and as soon as he does, he can see what's wrong. The pages aren't pages at all. The cover of the book has been stuck onto a cardboard box. Sherlock Holmes's adventures aren't anywhere to be seen. There are no pages inside, no stories. Instead, there are dozens of newspaper clippings. Missing girls, reports of missing girls from the downtown east side, dating back more than 2 years. The one with the oldest report has a face he vaguely recognizes. Anna Kerov, one of Becca's friends from work. She was a server, like Becca, reported missing in 2017. Why did his sister have these? Why was she collecting and hiding reports of missing girls? Jason's heart is beating too fast. His hands are shaking again. Becca must have been mixed up in something bad. Why else would she have this stuff? And under the clippings, there's something else. A flat white square. It's not paper. It's too thick. It's wedged into the corner of the box, and it takes a bit of effort to wriggle it free. It's a Polaroid photo, a shot of the street. 2 dark figures standing under a neon sign. Even with 2 letters blown out, Jason can see that the sign should say Ray's Place, and there's a pair of red boxing gloves next to the name, looking like they probably flashed on and off. What does it all mean? A photo of a boxing gym, and a box full of newspaper articles about missing girls, and now Becca is dead? Jason's more sure than ever that she didn't overdose. His hand tightens around the photograph and crushes it into a ball. Dun dun dun!
It is exactly the right sound effect.
That was so good.
Yeah, I feel like it's important to make your own like in and out sound effects when necessary.
Awesome. Thank you for that. I should also remind the audience that if they have questions for our authors this afternoon, the Q&A function of Zoom is turned on, so you can toss questions into the Q&A, and I will ask our lovely writers what their answers might be to those questions. So yes, toss your questions in the Q&A section, and I will share them. While we're waiting for the questions to just start piling in, what pulled each of you into being a writer?
June, you can go first because I just finished.
Okay. Mine began with, so when I was in middle school, I was not good at English. Like I'd always get C, and my dad was getting really concerned that I'd fail English class. And so he wanted me to fall in love with books, and I thought books were boring. So he'd always like buy me books and try to get me to read it. And I feel like, oh, so boring. And then one day I saw the black and white adaptation of Pride and Prejudice on TVO. And I was just like, what is this? This movie is amazing. And my dad's like, oh, there's like a book. It's like based on a book. Do you want to read it? And so I read it and I loved it. I don't think I like quite understood like what Jane Austen was trying to, like the commentary she was trying to make, but I was just like, the romance is so good. And then from there, I fell in love with like Charlotte Bronte's Jane Eyre, and I devoured all of the Bronte sisters' books, Jane Austen's book, and then from there, like I started writing fan fiction of Pride and Prejudice, and yeah, like I wrote fan fiction of Pride and Prejudice, and then I got into the whole fan fiction world, so I started writing fan fiction of anime. And then one day, like I was reading so many historical romances back then that I'm just like, okay, let me try writing my own historical romance set in Regency or Victorian era. And then I was just like, oh, okay, like I realized I was capable of writing original fiction. And yeah, like those days are what really got me into the love of writing and sharing my writing online and receiving responses from readers. I think that really made me just love the idea of getting my stories out in the world and having people catch a glimpse of like slices of my own imagination. So that's what really got me into writing.
And Tash, what pulled you into being a writer?
My wife dared me to write a book, is the short answer. The slightly longer answer is that I have always made up elaborate stories. Like I'm a maladaptive daydreamer, but I genuinely, for most of my life, believe that everyone has like 7 or 8 novels worth of content that they can just dip in and out of in their heads as like an imaginary world. I think I might have frozen. Have you frozen? Nope. There you go.
Oh, you're back.
Yeah, sorry, you froze for a second. So I was traveling with my wife. We were living in Chile at the time, and I had a lot of time in the day, and I was doing a lot of reading, and I was reading a lot, catching up on a lot of the popular YA that had come out whilst I had been living in India in a tent. And I just kept being like 25% in and being like, I know exactly what's going to happen. Like, I know who is going to end up with who. I know what the overarching plot is. And I'm not interested enough to like keep reading it, basically. And my wife was like, well, if you think you're so smart and you know exactly what's going to happen in every novel ever, then maybe you should write your own. And I was like, fine, I will. And then I did. And that became the second book in my sci-fi series. So I wrote a 4-book sci-fi series. I'd signed with a small press, and they turned out to be horrible people, and that was a terrible experience. And during that time, fan fiction saved my love of writing. Even though I had never written fan fiction before, I took a step back from the traditional publishing world, but was still like had all these things I wanted to create. And so I started creating for a couple of fandoms that I was in. And just having that feedback and having people like the things that you've written, and not having reviews that say things like, I didn't like young adult fiction before I read this, and I still don't, and other such like wonderful feedback that you get from strangers on the internet. And so fan fiction actually kept me writing, and was the only reason that I'm here today as like an author who has done things. But yeah, my wife dared me is the origin.
It was a great origin story.
It's pretty funny, right?
Questions from the audience now flowing in. From the audience, how did or do you select the names of your characters? Where do all your names come from?
I have a pretty funny answer for that.
All right, go ahead.
I'm a substitute teacher, so I go into different schools every day, all of the time, and whenever I get good names, I write them down. And sometimes I do like to do a little mix and match, and I always check the like etymology and stuff. But sometimes you get a student and you're like, that name is already like definitely a YA franchise. Like, I can't believe that you have not trademarked your name.
But
I steal real children's names.
I'm kind of similar. Like I my go-to website is like babynames.org or whatever.
Wow.
Yeah. So I like scroll through like Korean names, and then I'm all about like the vibe. I'm like, oh, does this name have the vibe I'm going for?
Nice.
And then if it the vibe, then I look up the meaning, and I'm like, okay, this seems appropriate for my heroine or my other characters. And so that's how I give it to them.
Nice. I actually just realized in my latest book, like this is like the 5th round of it I've been doing with my agent, and I realized I have a character called Michelle and another character called Michael, and I'm like, this even happened? Like, who let me write this book? I have 2 characters essentially the same. So
It's not confusing at all.
Not at all, no. It's brilliant. Just can't believe I didn't notice. But nobody noticed.
Another one from the audience. Do you have any books or authors that you hated, but then changed your mind when you became a writer?
Ooh,
that's a tricksy one.
It is.
I think I appreciate a lot of authors more than I did before I became a writer. Like, I used to just be a bit like, well, I don't like this book, it was predictable or whatever, and a bit dismissive of the amount of labor that goes in. Like, even the worst book you've ever read, like someone absolutely just put their heart and soul into it. And, you know, they were trying, probably. Most people are trying really hard. And so I think it's given me a lot more like empathy and a lot more ability to see different things that people excel at that maybe they haven't like hung together an entire story that I loved, but there's like pieces of their craft that I can still appreciate. But it's also ruined reading for me, becoming a writer in many ways. Like, I was an English teacher before, and that didn't ruin it. Like, I don't know, just knowing all of the story techniques and things, it really changes the way you read.
I feel you on that. That's why it's hard to get into fiction these days. So I'm more drawn to like memoirs because it feels a bit more like it's about someone else's actual life kind of thing. And so, but yeah, for me, I don't hate any authors, but I would say like there was a time when it was popular to kind of not like Stephanie Meyer, the author of Twilight. And I was in that group. I was like, oh, this book is it's like so shallow and being all
had you read it?
Yeah,
you at least had read it, because I feel like the worst is that
I read like the first half and I was
at least you tried. I feel like at least if you give it an effort, but so many people were like very anti-Twilight. I'm not anti-Twilight, just to be clear.
Just
like,
riding the trend.
I was too old for it, really. Like, I don't know if I would have liked it or not had I been younger. But yeah, it was totally trendy. Everybody hated it. It was like the Justin Bieber of
YA. And I was in that ship, and I was just like, yeah, just trashing on it. Everyone else was doing it, and I was like, I was like, oh, I'm studying English at university. I know what good books are. This is not good book. But I think now, looking back, like now as an author, but also I've been listening to a lot of podcasts of author interviews, and so many YA authors were inspired to write their books because of Stephanie Meyer's Twilight series. Yeah, and so that
young people read because of
that. It opened the door to like reluctant readers as well. And so I'm like, oh, look, she did, like, just because I don't like it doesn't mean that it didn't serve a great purpose to the book community. And so my perspective has changed a lot. And now it's more like, kind of like you mentioned, Tash, like as authors, we realize how much goes into these books. And so it's like, you know what? I respect her. I respect the work she's done.
I'm going to make you hate me a little bit now, June, though. I think the closest I've ever coming to hating a book was, in fact, Pride and Prejudice, because when I moved to Canada, I became a high school teacher here. I've been teaching English as an additional language. They made me take English 101 because my degree is from the UK. Like, they don't care that I have a degree in computer science and we only do computer things. Like, you have to have the 101. So they made me take this online course, and the book I had to read was Pride and Prejudice. My professor was like a Pride and Prejudice scholar, and I was just reading it. I was just so enraged the whole time about how Lizzie's supposed to be this feminist icon, and reading it as an adult, I was like, everything she does is for a man's approval.
It's okay. Like, looking back, even Jane Eyre is pretty messed up as well.
My whole essay was just like a feminist slam of Elizabeth Bennet as a person, and then I like never looked back at it. I don't know. It would have been nonsense.
It's okay. It's okay.
It was because I was forced to read it at a time when I did not want to.
Yes, there's nothing that will ruin a book faster than being forced to read it.
More about hating literary analysis, I think, than hating the specific book. Like, you can make
that's Shakespeare, high school,
long enough. Yeah, I'm more of a like read it once and then have some thoughts about it, but not write it down.
Then it turns to hate.
Yeah, then it turns to rage.
Yeah.
All right, look and see. No more questions from the audience quite yet. At this, I'll take a little break because there's any last minute questions from the audience. And I want to let all of the audience members know that we have giveaway copies of books, courtesy the publishers of the books. So thank you to the publishers. If you would like to win a copy of one of those books, all you have to do is send me an email and I will do my best to get you a shiny prize book. My email address is paige.mcgeorge@lethlib.ca, which is paige.mcgeorge@lethlib.ca. So paige.mcgeorge@lethlib.ca. I would put it on the screen, but there isn't a way for me to do that.
You could do it in the NATO alphabet, just for a bit of added interest.
that would just go downhill very quickly.
Go, it's fine. Pluto, nobody cares.
But yes, email page.mcgeorge@lethlib.ca. If you are a real and actual teenager, as opposed to a grown-up who just enjoys YA literature, do let me know in your email, because I'm going to, make it easier for the actual teenagers to win the actual teenager books. That being said, if you are a grown-up in the audience and you would like to win a book, send me an email as well, and I will do my best. But I will give priority to the actual YA readers.
An actual teenager sounds
right?
like an adult.
I did tell two of my Dungeons and Dragons DMs who were asking about that, if they gave me a very good, dramatic performance, possibly involving interpretive dance, of what it is to be a teenager in 2021, I might, add them to the priority list as well.
If they send me a video of said interpretive dance of what it means to be a teenager in 2021, I will post them a book.
It's a good challenge. We'll just put that challenge out there.
Really good challenge. I love that. Yeah. What does it mean to be a teenager at any time? Show me with your dancing.
Everything is better when explained through dance. We do have one final question from the audience. Do you have any advice for people looking to become authors or potentially writing books? What's the best advice you could give somebody who wants to become an author and get a book out there?
Write a whole bunch. You'll get way better at it the more you do of it. That's my
I would say, if you are a fan of anything, start with fan fiction. And also try sharing your stories online. Like, I know there's dangers of like plagiarism or whatever, but it's still good to like practice, I think, online and get reader feedback, and find a critique circle. So people you trust who are willing to critique your book, so you can improve as a writer as well.
Pay attention to what you like when you're reading, so that you can kind of hone in on what your perspective on good writing looks like, and you can then look for things that are going in that direction in your writing. Learn to edit. There's lots of online editing help. There's apps. Hemingway.app is awesome. It'll tell you, like, highlight it all in different color for you. I give this to all my students. It's like the best paper helper of all time. Hemingway.app.
Wow.
It's just online. You just
I need to use this.
Yeah, no, I use it for all my high-low books, because they have to be at a certain grade, like a reading level. And then Hemingway will like look at it and tell you what reading level it's at. So if you're doing a college paper, for example, and then you put it in and it's like, this is kind of a grade 10 paper, then you can be like, I'm going to pull out the thesaurus and add some $10 words and get this up to a college paper standard. It's brilliant.
There we go. That is our writing advice. Love it. Thank you both for joining me this afternoon. It was a lovely way to wrap up our afternoon of Word on the Street teen extravaganza. Should put that on the tent next year. Thank you for being here. Thank you, Shar, for interpreting for us.
Thank you.
And for audience members, do take a look at the schedule for tomorrow's grown-up sessions, because there's some great authors and comics people popping in tomorrow for Zoom sessions. The Word on the Street.ca, I believe, is our website. And a last minute thank you to the Lethbridge Herald for sponsoring our tent this year. Thank you guys, and have a wonderful weekend.